Okay, shalom everyone, and welcome to Bits of Torah Truths. And this week's Torah portion is Parashat Tetze. And I titled the study this week, The Torah Command to Show Mercy and Grace to Others and to God's Creation. Okay, and so I posted the link in the room, MATSATI.com. Okay, so in this week's reading is from Parashat Tetze, and in the PDF file, it says Shov Team. I forgot to change that. I'll have to go back and change that. But Parashat Tetze. And Moshe lists in this portion 21 mitzvot spanning a number of topics when the people enter into the promised land. And these topics include the following: laws relating to a prisoner of war, how do you treat prisoners of war, inheritance to the firstborn, rebellious children, capital punishment by hanging on a tree, not damaging your neighbor's property, prevent personal injury, planting seed, don't work two different animals side by side, wearing multi-threaded clothing, tzitzit, divorce, adultery, fornication, incense, being a eunuch, finances or interest, stealing from the Lord by neglecting a vow, and stealing produce from your neighbor's field. We read of the Levirate marriage and the prohibition on remarrying a divorced wife who had remarried, and punishing by flogging, limiting to 40 strokes, correct and fair weights of measure for merchants, and that about covers it. And so there are a good number of prohibitions, and these prohibitions, we are told, are necessary by reason that you are to not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. So when we read through these lists of commands, do you think these commands are important for us today as believers in Yeshua in the land that we dwell? Okay, so the scriptures we're looking at is Deuteronomy 22 verses 1 through 4, and it says the following: You shall not see your countryman's ox or his sheep straying away, and pay attention to them. You shall certainly bring them back to your countryman. If your countryman is not near you, or if you do not know him, then you shall bring it home to your house, and it shall remain with you until your countryman looks for it. Then you shall restore it to him. Thus you shall do with his donkey, and you shall do the same with his garment. You shall do likewise with anything lost by your countryman which he has lost and you have found. You are not allowed to neglect them. You shall not see your countryman's donkey or his ox fallen down on the way and pay no attention to them. You shall certainly help him to raise them up. Okay, so this week, and that was Deuteronomy 22, 1 through 4. And so this week the Lord tells us that we are to care for our neighbor's things as if they were our own, according to Deuteronomy 22, 1 through 4. The inherent property of this command is to love your neighbor as yourself. In addition to this, we are told about a number of sins that we are to be aware of as they are listed above. And as the people of God, we are to avoid such things. These are known in Judaism as the negative commands, the prohibitions. And the positive commands this week are related to the instruction to take care of your neighbor's things. And if we see something we could help with, we are to do so for the good of our neighbor. We're also told to not have differing weights and measures when engaged in business. And this may also be understood as another form of taking care of others regardless of who they are. And the standard for the people of God is to live in justice, truth, and peace with all men on this earth. Now, the rabbinic understanding of the commandments is that the positive commands require an action to be performed and are considered to bring a person closer to God. The negative commands are to be avoided. Violation of the negative commands causes one to become distant from the Lord. And I believe everyone would agree that sin, by its very nature, separates us from the Lord. In striving to be closer to God, one attempts to live in accordance with His wishes, to live according to His testimonies and His holy words. And with these things in mind, the rabbis of Midrash Tehillim 49, part 1, classify both the Torah and Halacha as pure and glistening like snow. And so we'll talk a little bit about this next week in a Psalm study. And they say that Torah and Halacha glisten like snow, and they are righteous and holy. In Midrash Tehillim 49 part 1 it says, "Give ear, all you inhabitants of Cheled." And Cheled means the world. And why is the world Cheled? Because in the time to come, the corrosion, the chaluda of the wicked will show on their faces. And in Psalm 49, David uses this rare and unusual noun that we talked about earlier today, Cheled. And it's translated as world to describe the earth. And in Midrash Tehillim, the rabbis describe the wicked becoming rusty and old in their faces using this word Cheled. And this may be interpreted as the Torah of God having the capacity or capability of maintaining us, keeping us fresh and new and pleasant before the Lord, before others, and in this world. And read Psalm 119. Talks at length. You know, that's a really long psalm. Talks at length on this topic. Now, sin, on the other hand, wears one down and wears one old. So much so that it becomes obvious to all by one's outward appearances. We know this, like when you're watching television, you see the movie stars, and when they begin doing drugs and drinking and alcoholism and all that stuff, you can see the wearing of sin on their bodies and the way they look. And so we find this concept is very real. That sin drags down, it wears down, and it becomes obvious by the outward appearance of its effects on our lives. Now, these are important concepts related to who we are and how we should live. And the Midrashic literature has a lot to say concerning the preserving nature of living a righteous life, and so do the apostolic writings, the New Testament. And according to Midrash Rabbah Devarim, the kind of lifestyle that keeps one whole is summed up within the command that one is to do if one finds a bird's nest sitting on the ground, from Deuteronomy 21 verse 6. According to the scriptures, we are to show mercy even to God's creation, and having a life filled with grace and mercy is emphasized in the command of happening upon a bird's nest, according to Midrash Rabbah. I put Midrash Tehillim down here. According to Midrash Rabbah Devarim, Parashat 6, part 3. And on page 2 and 3 I have that. I'll read through that. It says the following. It says, "This bears out what Scripture says, for they will be a chaplet of grace upon your head." The rabbis say the words of the Torah are grace for your old age. How? When a learned man grows old, all flock around him and consult him on the words of the Torah. Another explanation, what is the meaning of "for they shall be a chaplet of grace"? Rabbi Phinehas, son of Hama, said, "Wherever you go, pious deeds will accompany you. And when you build a house, then you shall make a parapet for your roof. If you have put on a new garment, the precepts accompany you. As is said, you will not wear mingled stuff. If you have gone to cut the hair of your head, the precepts accompany you. As is said, you will not round the corners of your heads. And if you have a field, and you have gone to plow therein, the precepts accompany you. As it says, you will not plow with an ox and an ass together. And if you are about to sow it, the precepts accompany you. As it says, you will not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed. And if you reap it, the precepts accompany you. As is said, when you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field. And that's relating to giving to the poor, the gleanings. And so God says that even if you are not engaged in any particular work, but merely journeying on the road, the precepts accompany you. Whence is this? For it is said, if a bird's nest chance to be before thee in the way. Okay, so and that was from Midrash Rabbah Devarim, Parsha 6, part 3. And the rabbis parallel the meaning of grace upon one's head with Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. And they mention that in the Midrash. And it says the following, actually Proverbs 1, 7 through 9. I have here in the study. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace upon thy head, and chains about thy neck." Now that's the King James Version, and I chose the King James Version because it says ornament of grace. Other translations do not. Now obviously this is a reference to what is worn on the high priest's head from Exodus chapter 28 verse 36. The crown of gold that was constructed from one piece of pure solid gold. The crown is engraved with the words, "Holy to the Lord." And the Talmud Bavli, Sukkah 5, described the eyewitness testimony of Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Josi, who saw this crown in Rome. In both the Talmud and the recordings of the writings of Josephus inform us that after the destruction of the Second Temple, many of the sacred vessels were plundered and taken to Rome, where they were publicly displayed for many years. And so this engraved thing that went on the high priest's forehead is recorded of being seen by Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Josi. Now, something that is noteworthy with regard to the crown of gold, the scriptures state that from Exodus 28, verse 38, "It shall be worn on Aaron's forehead that he shall carry the iniquity of the holy things, which the children of Israel shall sanctify in all their holy gifts, and it shall always be upon his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord." Now, Aaron is said to bear the iniquity of the holy things. And how is that possible without the grace of God, which King Solomon calls an ornament of grace upon his head? The Midrash states that grace will follow the life of the person who is a child of the Most High God. And because of God's grace, pious deeds will accompany the child of God. Examples that are given are making a parapet to your roof to protect one from falling off the roof, to not wearing mingled clothing which parallels lives mingled with sin. Additional parallels to the pious deeds is related to not rounding the corners of your beard, not plowing with two kinds of animals, not sowing the field with two kinds of seed, and leaving some of the harvest for the poor to reap. And even when not engaged in work on the road, and when you happen upon a bird's nest, one is to show mercy on the mother and her eggs. The point is that by the grace and mercy of God, we too are to have grace and mercy towards one another, the land, and even to God's creation. All of these things direct us to the two greatest commands in the Torah, which were summed up by Yeshua, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. These are the things that follow the life of the one who follows in the footsteps of Yeshua the Messiah. Yeshua said in Matthew 23, "Some of the worst cases of sinfulness can be seen among the religious leaders who act in hypocrisy and who presume to go before others in God's name." A man's own selfishness causes him to excessively focus on himself, like we're reading in the Psalm 49. And the strength of this sin is noted in Psalm 49, which says in Psalm 49 verse 21, "The sinful man, when he is in honor, will have no insight, and when his honor is taken from him, he becomes like a beast and worth nothing." And this attitude will prevent a person from experiencing the joys of sharing, giving, and having genuine good quality relationships. The approach that we should take from this study is to consider these commands and the way in which we can overcome selfishness in our own minds. And for example, taking the eggs from a helpless and defenseless mother bird. This command in and of itself tells us that we are to make the conscious decision to change our attitudes of selfishness and decide to think, to focus, and to plan to do good to others and to not serve our own selves, our own selfishness. One of our goals should be to understand the importance of honoring people as opposed to revering things or money over people. The Torah portion in the Midrash speaks of the mercy and the grace of God, to love one another, and these things tells us that we are to realize how people and genuine relationships are more important and valuable than having money and material possessions. The Apostle Paul wrote how to overcome selfishness, saying, "Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God." And Yeshua also set the ultimate example of his sacrifice for us, since selfishness is seeking our own lusts and desires regardless of its impacts on others. And this is sin that must be overcome. And this should be a glaring reminder for us to examine our lives and to eliminate pride in our lives as best possible, and to walk in the footsteps of Yeshua and to seek the Lord by faith for the salvation of our souls. And with the help of the Holy Spirit and a little self-determination, we can avoid seeking our own pleasures, instead seek the good of others and putting Yeshua the Messiah first in our lives. And this will manifest the kind of love the Lord desires for us to have in our lives, which suffers long and is kind and does not seek its own. And in this way, we will be counted worthy to partake in the world to come. Okay, so that concludes the study, and I'll release the mic, and anyone has any comments.